Byron Graves. How you doing today?
Really good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I've been looking forward to this ever since I met you at the Bay Area Book Festival.
Yeah, me
And
too.
as a basketball fan, I've loved the play-by-plays in your book. And whenever you mentioned Steph Curry, I was like, yes, go Steph.
Right.
So it
How can
was
you not
very
love how can you not love Steph Curry?
So it was very exciting to read, and the emotionality of the characters also was pretty intense.
Thank
So first, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself.
Sure. I am Byron Graves. I'm Ojibwe and Lakota, and I am originally from the Red Lake Indian Reservation. I currently reside in Denver, Colorado. I've been writing for about 10 or 12 years now. It really took off fairly recently within the last couple of years, with the debut of Resball coming out last September of 2023. And I love retro video games. Obviously, I love basketball. And you can find me at a skate park in Denver most evenings if I'm lucky.
Oh, so you skate?
Yeah, I love skateboarding. I picked it up for my next book actually, and I fell in love with it.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
cool. All right, well, then I'm going to go completely out of order and ask you about your next book. Tell me about it.
Yeah, it's currently titled Skate, which it's spelled like skate, Skate, with the accent mark at the end. It's a Lakota word, which means fun or play. And it's a summertime book. It's another young adult book. And it really focuses on a kid going through a really challenging time in his life and falling in love with skateboarding. I'm a big advocate for youth to have something that really matters to them and something they're really into, and this kid just happens to pick up skateboarding. So it's a really fun journey. It's a summertime book, so there's all the every kid loves summer, right? So there's a lot of those summertime adventures also in it that I wasn't able to do with Resball since that took place in the school year.
So you didn't skateboard before you wrote the book?
Nope.
Cool. What brought you to skateboarding?
Growing up in the 90s, skateboarding was on everything. Like Bart Simpson was skateboarding, like the Tony Hawk games were about to come out. It was in every cool kid in every movie or TV show had a skateboard, right? Even if you never saw them actually skate, that was like the indicator that this kid was cool. But I grew up where there was just dirt roads and, rivers and lakes, and there wasn't a lot of areas to skateboard. So as cool as I thought it was from being a huge fan of pop culture, there was nowhere for me to really skateboard. And then, as I got into my 20s and 30s, I really just started to think like, well, that's a young person sport. It looks really dangerous, probably a bad time to pick it up. And then when I got the idea to write my most recent book, I wanted to just dabble enough to be able to like feel what it felt like to be on a board or get the atmosphere of a skate park. And I took some lessons, and those lessons I think advanced me way faster in a way safer manner than if I was just on a skateboard by myself. So I learned a lot really quick in how to be safe and how to skateboard. And then I just fell in love with it, and it became my escape. It's kind of my zen place. If I'm on that skateboard, I can't think of anything else because you're really focused on not falling. So it's just like my mental break from the world.
Oh, that sounds great. And when is it going to be released?
That's still tentative. I'd say probably somewhere like at the latest, like fall of 2025.
Oh, we're going to have you back.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to come back and chat about it.
That's great. So, do you want to bring us through your writing journey?
Sure. Um, I originally started the process of coming up with storytelling thanks to my mother at a very young age. She, rather than reading me bedtime stories, she would make them up. So she wasn't reading from a book, she was just coming up with these tales. And instead of it putting me to sleep, it got me incredibly excited and interested. And I started to come up with like cameos. Like I'd be like, what if Scooby Doo popped in here? Or like, what if we had the Smurf show up? And I was giving her these story ideas like, hey, let's have this happen instead. Like, I like my version better than your version. And she finally was like, oh my God, tell your own stories then. So then I got into like poetry and music. I loved lyrics. I loved writing lyrics. I dabbled with making music for a while. Um, but with writing, I was able to do it by myself on my own time when I had the mental bandwidth and the emotional bandwidth to sit down at a computer and really work really hard. So somewhere in my early 30s, about 10 or 12 years ago, I started to take it really serious. And then I spent a ton of time getting books on how to write, dialogue, plot structure, all those things. I started to read other books that were like books I was trying to write. And then I just spent a ton of time, learning the industry, learning how to find an agent, writing a few books that probably were just great practice for me that never got published. And then, I found my agent through social media. Her name's Terry Wolf. She's an incredible person, love her to death. We connected on social media and she saw, what I was talking about, what I was promoting, the type of book I was working on. She asked to see it, and that's how her and I became connected. And then shortly thereafter, Heart Drum launched, which is an imprint of HarperCollins with a focus on Indigenous authors. And I ended up connecting with them, and they found Resball and they loved it. And it's been kind of just a roller coaster and a really fun journey ever since then.
Wow, that sounds great.
Yeah, it was kind of
So,
unorthodox, kind of all over the board. It's not
so
the normal
how,
writer journey.
yeah, how autobiographical is Rest Ball?
I'd say, it's a combination of this amalgamation of all these things that I saw of like my friends, my family members, my teammates, my community members. I'm from the Red Lake Indian Reservation where the book takes place. I played high school basketball for the Red Lake Warriors. I had that experience. So there's a lot of it that's very firsthand, and then there's a lot of it that's kind of existential and pulling from these different experiences that I saw a lot of people really close to me go through. And when you're writing a story, you want to keep every draft, things get worse for the character. And so I changed things from just turning the notch up a little bit more, the intensity, the situation, what something meant or mattered. And so all those things, kind of that autonomy of storytelling, led to the final version, the published version. But yeah, a lot of heart, a lot of memories in that book.
I'm going to quote from you the beginning of your book, the opening of your book in
Sure.
Resball. It says, Resball, it says, it's a beautiful chaos. Sometimes it feels like that's what we are, beautiful chaos. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I kind of found these parallels between what I consider Resball, which is this frantic pace, poetry in motion, freestyling, flashy plays, fast breaks, deep three-pointers, and not going along the lines of so much of a like structure and a plan. And there's some magic in that. And that parallel of the reservation life that I experienced was very similar. Things weren't like the pop culture that I saw on TV. I didn't go to a high school that was in any of like the TV shows that I was watching at the time. And the surrounding non-Indigenous communities, as I got to know more of them, I saw how different our lives were. Even though we had a lot of similarities, really different. And so there's like our culture and the land we grew up on and powwows and the meaning of our language and all of those things are also, there's the backdrop of, intergenerational trauma and the echo effects of genocide and being placed on a reservation. And so that's only been, a few generations. And so that's all there. And then there's this beauty of Indian humor, and there's this excitement of, basketball and sports and the celebration of who we are and the pride of who we are. And so that's where that like beautiful chaos kind of came together for me with that line. That was one of the earliest lines I wrote, and it stuck. I think probably like 98% of the book got like changed, edited, tweaked, removed, added. That line was maybe the first line I wrote, and it stayed the exact same line the whole time through 20 some revisions.
Interesting. So there's been a lot of intergenerational trauma. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, going back probably to my childhood, I was lucky enough to have spent time with and know my great grandma and my great aunt. And their first language was actually Ojibwe. English was their second language. And they were born at basically around the same time that our reservation was, officially created and put through with the treaties and whatnot. Um, so, you think about what happened to the Ojibwe people with the American government, the army, all those awful things, residential schools, um, and just that ends up genocide ends up in your DNA, and those people who are trying, each generation is trying to understand this new world that they're in. Um, Understanding changing from our Ojibwe name to a government name, a first, middle, and a last name, getting a social security number. What's a job look like in that world? All those adjustments and all those phases of trying to, find where we coexist amongst the American culture. And so, being that it's only been a few generations since all of that, I think we're still, catching our breath, finding our place, finding our strength, and figuring out, how we adapt and how we help the next generation that's coming up. But I think it places a different, really challenging, unique, obstacle in a way for a lot of us. But it also something that, the harder the situation, the more strength you find in overcoming it, and the more pride you find in overcoming it. So I think you can find a silver lining in there somewhere.
I was really interested, other than the fact that it was a basketball book, in reading, like finally reading a book about Native American culture. Like you just don't read about it that much, especially in young adult and middle graders. And I thought this book actually could have been for older middle graders as well as young adults. I thought that 13, 14-year-olds could have enjoyed it as well as the young adults. But it was great to see some representation there. And you don't learn about it in school. You just don't get it. All you learn a little bit is that there's alcohol abuse on the reservations, and that
Right,
reservations are bad. There's
right,
like badness going on reservations, and it's their fault,
right.
that it
Yeah, I
has
used to hear
nothing to
that.
do. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I used to hear that a lot when I got to be 16 and I was in Slam magazine and my team was in on ESPN and we were in USA Today. And so the like perspective of us amongst our non-indigenous peers, our opponents, if you will, the other schools around us started to kind of see us as like celebrities and became more interested and more engaging with us. And I built these like wonderful friendships with so many people from all of these surrounding communities. And they would share some of those thoughts and some of those concerns, like, hey, my grandpa told me this, or my dad told me that, or I heard from a friend, some of those negative stereotypes you were sharing. And so it was nice being able to network outside of the reservation and like share some of the like positives and some of the beautiful things and clarify some of those things with our surrounding community members. Right,
But
right.
anyway, there
Yeah, I
is
could definitely
actually
see that.
there is actually a bisexual character in the book.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I think you just want to find ways to be as reflective as possible of reality. And of course, somewhere in a group of, 15 or 20 people, there's going to be, someone who's bisexual, someone who's a lesbian, someone who's gay, someone who's possibly trans or non-binary. And so I felt like, I wanted to have that somewhere in the ratio or somewhere in the mix to be accurate because those people do exist, in any setting or situation. But I also felt like that character in particular, she was so like brave and tough and bold and kind of like, yeah, you got a problem with me being anything that I am, you know what I mean? So it fit that character's personality. I felt like the most to give that character that responsibility, if you will, of carrying, I think, the only LGBTQ representation that's in Resball.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought it was definitely fit. It
Yeah,
definitely
thank you.
fit.
There's a lot more in my next book because I felt like I could have done more with that. It felt like it was just one sentence and it was kind of mentioned, and so you knew that, but then it never really came up again. In Resball, in my next book, there's a lot more LGBTQ on-screen representation, if you will. So I'm really excited to get to share some of that.
How important was basketball on the reservation as you were growing up?
You know, it was like everything, and I think that's for a couple of different reasons. It predated the internet, and it predated smartphones, and it predated cable television and satellites. So you had your like five TV stations, right? And you had a movie theater 30 miles away. And for people who maybe didn't have a ton of money and didn't have a ton of means for transportation, um, and didn't have a lot of options for entertainment, the basketball game each like Tuesday or Friday night or Saturday night was kind of like everything. And so the kids who played were heroes. It was like being in the Beatles, you know, during Beatles mania. And so, and people like even like all this time later still talk about players from the 80s, 90s, the 2000s, like they're talking about like folklore or something. So the gymnasiums were packed. There would be lines for hours waiting to get in. It would be standing room only, and the crowd was so loud and exciting. And the games, like the on court action, was definitely impacted by the stands, by the fans, by like how much of the like magnitude each game felt like it mattered. It felt like every game was like the NBA finals or something. I was 16 years old signing autographs and taking pictures with people, and it was a weird experience, but it was like really, really cool. And I even knew back then, I was like, someday I'm going to find a way to like transpose this experience into some other medium. I didn't know what it would be at the time, but I was like, this is so weird and so cool. I wanted to like bring it back to life somehow.
What is what's the role of basketball on the reservations?
The
What's
role,
what's the role of basketball on the reservations right now?
I feel like it's very similar. I feel like it gives a lot of meaning and purpose to kids. It keeps kids from, you know, you got to go to school, you got to get good grades, you got to have the discipline to show up every day, which builds a lot of like character and discipline when you're like now you're 18 or 19 and you got to go to college and work way harder than high school, or you got to go get a job. So it lays out a lot of those things that I think are really extra important for kids who are in, you know, settings that are amongst like marginalized groups and settings where there's not as many opportunities and you really have to make the most of what you have. I think basketball really like prepares you to go into the world, whatever world that is. You know, knowing what teamwork is like, knowing what hard work is like, and being able to go out there and like do what you need to do after basketball. So I think it's a really great training ground, even if you never play college basketball, you never play pro basketball. Just that high school experience for kids who don't have a lot of other opportunities, I think is really important. And I think it's still championed. People still cheer it on. People love it. It's a lot of fun. So it's a lot of really special, important things that come from basketball on a reservation.
Are Native Americans represented in the NBA?
You know, Lindy Waters the third, he just signed with Golden State, which is really exciting. He was with the
Oh
Oklahoma City Thunder
no,
last year.
that's so
Um,
cool.
yeah, so I'm excited to cheer him on. I started following him on Instagram when he came on my radar. I know he does a ton of work for our communities. You know, puts his time and effort and money into making sure he gives back. So like everything you could ever want from a Native American who gets to get up to that stage and that platform, you always hope that they want to like stay connected and stay helping. And you know, he's definitely a person of a lot of high character. So I'm excited to see where his career goes from here.
Oh, that's great. Any others?
He's the one I know for sure. We have in the WNBA, we have Allison Peely, I believe her name is. I haven't had an opportunity to watch her, but she plays for the Minnesota Lynx, and you can see the community support. There's so many more people who attend her games who are Native Americans who are so proud to see a WNBA player. She was like the sixth or seventh pick in the draft, so she went pretty high, and she's been making a huge impact. I've seen games where she's been getting like 20 points, 10 rebounds. So she instantly, as a rookie, has come in and like made a huge impact on the Lynx. So that's really, really cool. My niece played Division I basketball, which for our community, that was the first player who went to play Division I. And so it was really our community, and a lot of other Native Americans were really excited to see her playing Division I basketball.
Oh, you must have
There
been
was,
really proud.
yeah, for sure. Shoni Schimmel, she played for the Cardinals, and she had a great WNBA career. She had this fantastic shot where she made I believe, a layup, a spinning reverse layup over Brittany Griner during the All-Star game several years ago. So we all that was the first time I heard Resball on TV. Her and her sister Jude Schimmel, they were in the Final Four, and the people, the commentators were like, "Yeah, they play a style of basketball called Resball," and they brought it up several times. That was really, really cool hearing that on TV. Well, as I was already excited as heck for the Schimmel girls.
Cool. The protagonist also goes through a lot of grief. A, is that something that you went through in your life? And B, how important do you think capturing that kind of emotions are for young adults?
I lost my father to cancer about 10 or 12 years ago, which was one of the things that spurred me on to begin writing. I wanted to take that loss and make it something that mattered and not have it in vain. So I carried that with me as I was like taking on my new writing journey. It was partially, to honor him, and not just continue to waste my life like I had been. I lost my nephew to cancer several years ago. So my sister and my niece both were playing their high school basketball careers as starters, as really important players, and my niece lost her brother during her basketball season. My sister lost our dad during her basketball season. So there was a lot of that firsthand experience in Resball, watching these young, amazing, beautiful teenage girls have to battle like dealing with that loss while still getting to school and still practicing and still having like the wherewithal to do well in a basketball game. So a lot of that was firsthand. The grief was definitely like my own feelings on losing my dad or losing friends that I've lost, losing my nephew. So it was very therapeutic as I walked through the steps and layers of understanding it. I think that like having that emotion or sharing emotions in young adult books is really important because um, kids can kind of see like maybe they're not alone if they're going through it, or if they have a friend going through it, maybe they can find a better way to understand or empathize, and maybe see like the layers and nuances of grief, and how, like I was saying earlier with like my skateboarding journey, how like you can utilize your passion and something you really love to be this beautiful distraction and help you get through the worst so you can get to just a little bit better of a place each day, each month, each year. But I think having like basketball or a passion, a hobby, whatever that is, showing that in my book was really it was something I was aware of and mindful of. I wanted to show that if you have this thing, it can help so much, and you need to have that thing. Don't just sit in your room by yourself feeling awful. Like, find something you love and, let it keep you okay for that moment.
You also had a lot of community.
For sure. Yeah, the community that was part of it, definitely, like from my reservation, when we lose somebody, when something tragic happens, it's never like when you see an anonymous person, gets murdered in the city that you live in, and you're on watching the 9 o'clock news and you feel bad because that's awful. But on our reservation, when someone passes away or something tragic happens, we know that person, we know their aunt, we know their cousin, maybe we know them personally. So like we share that tragedy and that grief. Like almost every week something bad happens, but we also share the like healing process and the helping process, and the like, hey, we're going to bring, a mac hot dish to your wake, or we're going to, make sure there's fry bread there so that the mom who's grieving or whatever it is has a little bit more time to not have to worry about those type of things. So there's this like beautiful like extended family feeling on my reservation, where we're always all looking out for each other, trying to help each other through the worst and the best. And I wanted to depict both of those things in Resball, where somebody's helping Trey or helping each other deal with the loss of his brother Jackson, but then the love and support of the community when it's time to cheer them on.
Yeah, that's great. It came across in the book.
Good. You always
I
wonder and worry when you're writing if the theme that you're trying to get across is going to connect later with someone else, because you know it makes sense in your head, but you're like, and you want to trust the reader when you write, right? So you're just like planting these little like seeds around and whatnot, and you're hoping it blossoms in someone else's mind. So it's always really affirming when other people tell me like, I got the thing you were doing, it made sense to me. I'm like, okay. Thank goodness.
So Trey's the protagonist, and he's trying to get the approval of his father, and he uses basketball to do that. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I mean, with a father who is really into sports, for example, I also feel like there's like, especially with a generation older and even current generations, um, the feeling of like being a man, if you will, that masculine, like you got to be tough, you got to go play sports, you got to go scrape your knees. And for me in my childhood, I wasn't into sports when I was young, and my dad was crazy about sports, and I was more interested in like playing video games and reading comic books. And I know like he had some moments when I was like grabbing My Little Pony instead of G.I. Joe, or when I first like started painting my fingernails. I know he felt this like sense of like this deep sense of like disappointment that I wasn't just this tough guy, macho guy. Um, and then I somehow, some way, just naturally was really, really good at basketball, and that's what all my friends were doing. So I just kind of started like playing, and the next thing I knew, I was like on the varsity team and starting. And the shift in like the way my dad treated me was so different. Like he was buying me basketball shoes. He was so happy to see me. He wanted to talk to me about the game last night. And so I shared a lot of that in the book, that firsthand experience of feeling like my father's approval was really dependent on how macho or tough I was, or like me playing a sport. I had a younger brother who was exactly like my dad, and those two from my brother's youngest days were just connected at the hip, because my brother was that macho tough guy who loved every sport like my dad. I was 3 years older and didn't quite have that same connection or bond, and it kind of hurt. It was kind of like I could see the difference between the treatment between him and my brother and then myself, and then how that shifted when I started playing basketball. And I
Mm.
was grateful for him giving me that additional attention and love, but I also was cognitive of like, wait a second, why did I have to do this to get that from you? And so I shared a lot of that in the book in
Yeah,
different ways, obviously, in ways that made sense for that character and setting.
it definitely came across. Now, alcohol use is talked about quite a bit in the book as a problem on the reservation. And even among the people in the basketball team, that's the reason that Trey gets on the varsity team is people are suspended. Now, Trey decides to use his integrity to save people from alcohol use as they play through the season. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, first of all, it's actually a stereotype. Like the percentage of people who deal with alcoholism on the majority of reservations is very similar to just your average American. So it's not like there's a couple that are really different, that are unique, almost anomalies, if you will. But overall, it's not like it is a negative stereotype that I was hoping I wasn't reinforcing by having it as part of this story. It was more of like my personal story, and when I was on varsity, I was the younger kid, just like Trey. I was a sophomore playing with all these like seniors who had like grown up together, and they were like my heroes, and I thought they were super cool, but they would want to go and like party or drink on the weekends and whatnot. And at the time, I was like, heck yeah, I want to go hang out with these guys. I want to go drink with them. I want to be cool because that's what they must do. You see the people who are older than you and you kind of follow suit, and it's kind of normalized. Um, but I had also heard of this team before us, like 10 years before, that almost went to the state tournament. And everybody talked about it like the rumor was that they had got drunk and that's why they didn't play good enough to go to state. And that was this like tale that we all heard. So I always had this like back and forth dynamic of like, maybe that's a thing that would like stop us from achieving our, maximum ability or maximum capability, but it's also me going along with like what the older kids wanted to do. And I just saw from like my years and even like a couple of like the next like 7, 10, 15 years later, the access that like a teenager on a reservation can have to alcohol. I don't know if you get it from like your older brother, your older cousin, your aunt or uncle, your parent, I don't know, but it seems like it's a little easier to get, especially if you play basketball and nobody wants to say no to you. People want to like make sure they're cool with you. So it seems a little more likely that if a basketball star is like, hey, can you go get me a 6 pack of beer? It's easier to have happen, at least in my experience. And that's what I saw in my reservation. And looking back on it, I wish I would have had the bravery that Trey had to say, hey guys, like let's get serious at least for like this playoff run. Like no drinking for this playoff run. Like this is our one shot, our one chance. Let's not even slow ourselves down by 2%, whatever percent that is. So I kind of lived vicariously through the experience of Trey being brave enough to say to the older kids, like, let's chill on the drinking and let's focus on basketball.
In the last two interviews I've done, the the women actually who have written the books have said in their most recent novel that they wrote it as a way for them to talk about what they wish they had done in their childhood. So you're not alone.
That makes sense.
I thought that was very interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
and also, I think alcohol abuse is a problem among kids in general. I don't think it's just a problem on the reservations. I
Yeah.
think anytime you can not normalize alcohol use in a book for teens, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Not demonize it, but not normalize it.
Right. Right.
At one point, Trey and his friends drive off of the reservation, and two white cops pull them over and act really negatively toward them. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I heard stories from uncles, aunts, my dad, different friends in the community that I grew up in, who just had these like horrible stories of being discriminated against, having police treat them what felt like it was different than maybe they would treat anybody else. For me, personally, I had almost that same experience in the book Hampton. I got pulled over one night. They told me it was for a broken headlight. And it was in Bemidji, Minnesota, right next to Red Lake, a non-indigenous community near my community. And at first, because like you could argue that I'm white passing, at first the police officer was really, really nice. And he just wanted to see my ID. He was like, "Don't worry about the headlight. Like, go ahead and get it fixed." But I still have protocol. I got to see your ID and registration. So it's like, yeah, sure. Handed it to him. But my driver's license showed that I was from the Red Lake Indian Reservation, and he looked at it and he gave me this funny look, and he looked at it again, and he gave me another funny look, and he left. And he was gone for a really long time, and then two more squad cars pulled up. And keep in mind, he pulled me over a broken headlight, and I was being super polite, cordial, accommodating whatever he needed. He comes back and he had like Christian Bale's Batman voice. And he was like demanding that I get out of the car. And I was asking him, like, what's going on? What's happening? And he was like, I know how you people are. I know that you drive around and drink. I know that if I search your car, I'll find drugs in it. And I can tell you're on drugs. And, I asked him, like, how can you tell I'm on drugs? And he was like, my training, you're acting fidgety. And I'm like, I'm nervous because of the way you're starting to act. So I saw that situation go firsthand from him thinking maybe I was just, a white kid from Bemidji to being like, oh no, he's actually Native American from this reservation, and how his demeanor changed and how intense and scary the situation got. So that story in Resval is almost firsthand. It's almost just nonfiction.
Wow. Sounds terrifying.
It was. It made me, and I have like basically like I know this sounds a little hyperbolic, but like post-traumatic stress disorder from that. And now I'm like always a little terrified of police, even though I have no reason to be. There's only a few bad apples out there. I think a lot of police officers are very commendable and I appreciate what they do. Um, but yeah, I just have that. I'm just a little scared now because that broke my trust. Because before that, I just trusted every police officer was going by the book and doing the right thing. This was 20 some years ago, though. You know, the awful situations we see with African Americans in different communities definitely was, parallel with my situation, not to that extreme, but still, similar enough where now I'm like, oh, there's more bad apples than we think, and it is kind of scary. You never know. So
Trey has a dialectical relationship with his best friend. He has some good parts of it and some bad parts of it. Do you want to talk about that?
yeah, that friend in particular, I wanted to have be almost the opposite of the like jock. I wanted them to be the more artistic, creative person. I wanted them to dress alternatively and feel kind of brave. So they were these like two different characters, right? But it was also an opportunity, like when he's interviewing him and shooting his documentary, it was an opportunity for me to find another way to get more information out of Trey and getting to like maybe ask him some questions that a friend normally wouldn't just ask him during a chat, just nonchalantly, but because of the documentary, there was this like freedom to go a little further with some of those questions. Some of the things I wanted Trey to say, I was able to get him to say because of those interviews with that friend. But I needed to create that character in the way where that would make sense, and give him a purpose and a reason for asking those questions. But then, some of the bad side of it is that fallout of, because they're so different, the girl that Trey's in love with, falls for his friend because they just have way more in common and they're more similar people. And so you see that fallout. But I also like that you see the recovery of that friendship. So kind of has three different layers to it.
Mm-hmm. So other than Scate, is there anything else on the horizon?
Um, I don't know how much I can say about it now, but I got to be part of this really fun anthology of a lot of authors that I'm a huge fan of. And it's the first time that I got to ever explore writing something that took place in more of a magical fantasy world where like anything could happen. And I had never even thought of like writing stuff like that because everything I've written so far has been very, very based in reality. So I'm really excited to get to share that when I'm able to share that. And then my 2 book deal with HarperCollins and Heartdrum is ending with the second book we've kind of talked about a little bit. So now it's time to go write that next book and hopefully, get a new book deal. But if this was it for me, if this was my run, it was something that I really appreciated and really enjoyed, and it was really exciting, and I'll never forget it. And I'll always be
I
grateful.
don't think this is your run.
Yeah, I hope not. I want to keep doing this. I'm having the best time of my life, but I'm without a book contract now, so we will see what happens.
You can tell in a book when a book is an author is having a good time, and I think that's reflected in the story, and that's reflected to the kids who read it. And I think
Yeah,
it's super important. I mean, as you can tell, I read a lot, and that's one of the things that you pick out is the joy of the person that's writing the book or the passion of the author who's writing the book. So
yeah, there was definitely a lot of passion in Resball, and there was also the need because of the dark subject matter to have fun and have those moments where you can laugh or see the characters enjoying themselves and what we call Indian humor. So I wanted to make sure that there was a lot of that in there to balance everything out. And those were some of my favorite scenes to write was when the kids were just like playing video games and having a blast. I was living that moment with them.
what would you tell your 10-year-old self?
Um, that everything's going to be okay and the weird alien person that you think you are that doesn't fit in and that you're going to be embraced someday for being yourself and you're going to feel proud of who you are and what you are and you're going to get to live your wildest dreams. You have no idea. Just
What
hang
about
in there.
what
There's
about
some rough years.
teenager?
yeah, there's some very rough years on the horizon, but you're going to get through it, and it's going to help you live your dreams later because you're going to use all of that to tell stories someday.
What about a budding author?
You know, find your purpose and your meaning. Why are you writing? You don't want to write to, everybody talks about getting an agent or, getting a book deal or, winning an award or being a bestseller, like all these things, but none of that might happen or all of that might happen, but you're going to have a lot of lonely nights. You're going to have a lot of really tough moments where you're like, God, am I making the right decision by sacrificing all this time with family and friends sitting at this laptop writing? But if you have a purpose and you have a meaning, then nothing else matters. And you start to write. Like when I found my purpose, which was writing for like reluctant readers on especially Indian reservations, especially my own, I was writing for that one kid in Red Lake, Minnesota, who hated reading, who loved basketball. And I wanted one kid to fall in love with reading. And I wanted one kid to see themselves in a book. We're a historically underrepresented group in literature. So that was another thing that kept me going, waking up at 4 a.m. before my 9 to 5 jobs, writing when I didn't want to, when it was beautiful outside, writing when I thought my writing sucked. Like, so find that. And, like you said, find the joy and find a reason. If you're stuck or frustrated, just quit for a week or 2 weeks or a month. Like it's okay to walk away. Come back when it's fun, come back when you're excited, and always like revisit that purpose and that meaning. And from that, nothing else will matter. The cards will fall where they may. But don't base your success or your feeling of like belonging on those other things that you don't have any control of.
What's on your professional bucket list?
I would love to see my writing transition into other mediums. I'm a huge graphic novel fan, I'm a huge comic book fan, and I'm a huge video game fan and movie fan, TV series. So if I could ever see one of my books make that leap outside of the book and into anything else, that's definitely on my bucket list. I would lose my mind if I ever saw my writing on Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus or anything like that. So fingers crossed, I'll keep doing what I'm doing for why I'm doing it. But if anything ever elevates to that point, yeah, I'm going to have to party for about a week or two.
Cool. Where can people find you?
Um, Google, maybe you just Google Byron Graves author, anything and everything will pop up. Articles, interviews. I love Instagram and TikTok. You can find my link tree, and then you can see almost anything on my link tree. But I'm very responsive on social media. If anyone ever wants to post something, DM me, comment, join me. And my social media just kind of feels like a fun community. I love to chat with other authors and fans of my writing. So my social media is a good time.
Great. Did we miss anything?
I don't think so. I had a blast chatting with you. I'm glad we finally got to talk, and I would love to return when my next book comes out. And hopefully I'll see you at another event sometime next time I'm on the West Coast.
Yeah, no, this was super fun. Great. Well, hopefully I will see you and our paths will cross again.
Yeah.
Otherwise, take care. All right,
Yeah.
hang
Thank
out.
you so much, Elizabeth.